UN Secretary-General António Guterres has earned high marks for setting and achieving his goal of gender parity in the UN's senior management and in improving the recruitment of women and gender balance in the UN's professional staff more generally. But as you know all too well, it has taken a very long time for the United Nations to get to this point. What, in your view, have been some of the principal obstacles, and who and what have finally made a difference?
Peggy, since we are celebrating UN 75, the best place to start is really the birth of the United Nations and the UN Charter on how best to create a new world order after the devastation of the Second World War. Now, it was a very transformational moment, and the UN Charter in its preamble ensures, and I quote, the equal rights of men and women to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom, unquote. Now, it starts with we the peoples, and it promises every individual in every country an equal claim to dignity, respect, and happiness based on freedom from want and freedom from fear. Now, these are all wonderful aspirations and norms agreed to by all member states, but there have not been enough practical changes on the ground and in our institutions, and the norms remain unfulfilled promises. So what are the principal obstacles, and who and what have made a difference? Let me be very blunt. Now, the principal obstacles are systematic gender barriers shaped by patriarchal power with deep historical roots. It is about how power continues to be unequally distributed and how women have continued to experience patriarchal power in the institutions of member states and in the UN itself. And this has resulted in the devaluation of women's work, the concentration of women in low-paid, low-status employment, the erosion of women's legal rights and voices in decision-making, and in multiple forms of violence. Now, what has made the largest difference? The tenacity, the courage, and the legacy of women engaged in the thought and practice of transforming societies and institutions to achieve equal rights and dignity for women. Now, they have taken to the front lines of change to get women the right to vote, to decent working conditions, to quality education, to equal rights of citizenship. In fact, 4 women out of the 160 delegates in San Francisco, supported by civil society women's activism, provided the leadership to include the equal rights of women in the UN Charter. They wanted to ensure that women would no longer be undervalued, undereducated, overworked, and underpaid, especially when member states were forging an inclusive rule-based order for the security of big and small nations, and countries coming out of colonialism were finding new pathways for development. Now, to address the widespread gender inequality in legal, social, and economic rights, women had to organize and mobilize to fight hard to be heard, to put their ideas of development and equality on the UN agenda, and to hold their countries accountable. In fact, the 4 global UN conferences on women in Mexico, Copenhagen, Nairobi, Beijing, with the theme Equality, Development, and Peace, provided the platform for action and catalyzed change in the situation of women in country after country. Many decades of advocacy and women's leadership have resulted in the global recognition of the contribution of women to development and the costs of gender discrimination to countries and to institutions themselves. Now, the UN Secretary-General is the global guardian of our shared values and shared vision as embedded in the UN Charter, with the promise to deliver a people-centered multilateral system in the 4 pillars of peace and security, development, human rights, and political governance. UN Secretary-General António Guterres, as a leader and as a person, understands deeply the working and intertwining of the 2 major historical forces of discrimination and inequality, colonialism and patriarchy, and the importance of changing power relationships. He has spoken very strongly about how gender inequality harms everyone when policies are made through the eyes of half the population and prevents us from benefiting from the experiences and intelligence of half of humanity. He has called himself a feminist and has earned high praise for major actions to achieve full gender parity and even more in the senior management, and appointing women leaders to head traditionally male arenas, for example, in the Department of Political and Peace Building Affairs, and also appointments of his special representative, the special representative of the Secretary-General in difficult countries like in Afghanistan recently. His actions must also be seen in the changing context when, for the first time in the history of the United Nations, 7 women leaders were also contesting for the top job in 2016. And many wanted to see a woman elected as Secretary General, including by the Women SG campaign of civil society. However, he has also faced some resistance from the traditional bastions of the UN bureaucracy and some member states that are opposed to women's equality and rights, or are using them in the context of big power rivalry.